Maya was a little girl who lived on the streets of a crowded city, and every day felt like a long battle for survival. She did not wake up in a warm bed or eat breakfast at a table. Instead, she opened her eyes on a piece of cardboard that she used as a mattress, under a broken roof that hardly protected her from the rain. When she woke up, the first thought in her mind was not school, toys, or friends. It was food. Hunger was her closest companion, and it followed her everywhere she went. She did not have parents who could help her. She only remembered their faces faintly, like old photographs fading in her mind. Some neighbors said her parents left the city long ago to find work and never returned. Others said they had passed away. Maya herself did not know the truth. All she knew was that she was alone. She lived near a busy market where people sold vegetables, fish, and baked bread. The smell of warm food made her stomach twist every morning, but she did not have money to buy anything. She survived by searching for leftovers in trash bins or waiting patiently for someone to offer her a small piece of bread. Every day she walked through the market barefoot, her small feet covered with dust. People saw her, but most looked away. Some were too busy, some were too tired, and some did not care. Maya never blamed them. She understood that everyone had their own problems. But sometimes, when hunger made her weak, she wished someone would simply notice her existence. Some days were better than others. A kind shopkeeper named Aaron would give her stale bread at night so it would not go to waste. Maya always said thank you even though she could not say much more. She was shy and quiet, and words often got stuck in her throat. Other days, when she found nothing to eat, she would drink water and try to sleep early so hunger would not hurt as much. She wore the same clothes every day, a faded shirt and a pair of torn shorts. They were too big for her because they were not made for a child. Someone had probably thrown them away, and Maya had picked them up because they were better than having nothing. In winter, when cold winds filled the streets, she wrapped herself in plastic bags to stay warm. She didn't complain, but sometimes she cried quietly, wishing she had a real jacket like other children. Despite her difficult life, Maya had something beautiful inside her, a soft voice that could turn sadness into music. Even though she was hungry and tired, she often hummed songs when she walked. She didn't know where she learned them, but they came to her naturally, like a secret gift. When she sang, her voice was gentle yet strong, and it made her feel like she belonged somewhere, even if she didn't know where that place was. At night, when the streets became quiet, Maya liked to sit under a broken street lamp. The light flickered, but it made a small stage for her. She held a wooden stick as if it were a microphone and sang songs she created from her own heart. Sometimes she pretended there was an audience cheering for her. She imagined applause, smiles, and people holding food for her, not because she begged, but because she earned it by singing. Many people believed she was a silent child, but that was not true. Maya had a lot to say, she just did not have anyone to listen. Music was the only way she could speak her truth. In her songs, she told stories about hunger, loneliness, dreams, and hope. Sometimes, strangers passing by heard her gentle voice and stopped for a moment, surprised by the sound coming from such a small girl. A few smiled, a few clapped, but most continued walking. Still, every small smile meant something to Maya. The streets were dangerous, especially at night. There were older children who fought for food, drunk men who shouted at everything, and police who chased homeless people away. Maya had to be careful. She learned how to hide when danger came near. She learned how to run fast, how to stay silent, and how to disappear into shadows. Even though she was small, she was strong. She had survived for years in a place where most adults struggled. She often wondered what life was like for other children. She saw them in clean clothes, holding their parents' hands, laughing, going to school. They looked safe and happy. She wished she could do those things too, but she knew her world was different. Her world was made of broken walls, empty stomachs, and long nights, but inside her heart she carried something bright, a belief that life could change one day. Even if no one believed in her, she believed in herself. And every night under that broken street lamp, she sang as if her voice could change her fate. She did not know when or how, but she hoped that one day her music would stop being just a dream and become her reality. That fragile hope kept her alive, even when everything else felt hopeless. Maya's life on the streets was full of problems, but there was one thing that made her feel strong: her ability to sing. She had discovered her voice accidentally, not through school or teachers, but through loneliness. When she was younger, she used to cry softly at night because hunger and fear were too heavy for her small heart. One night while crying, she began humming without thinking. The hum turned into a melody, and suddenly she felt calmer. From that moment, she realized that singing helped her forget her pain, even if only for a little while. Maya never had anyone to teach her music. She had never heard a professional singer, never owned a radio, and never saw a music show. Yet she sang with a natural rhythm, as if music lived inside her. Her voice was soft but filled with emotion, like she was telling a story every time she opened her mouth. Sometimes her songs were sad, sometimes hopeful, and sometimes they were just random sounds she made while roaming the streets. Singing did not give her food or shelter, but it gave her comfort, and that comfort was priceless. One day she found a broken guitar behind a garbage container. The wood was scratched, one string was missing, and the rest were rusty, but to her, it was a treasure. She cleaned it as best as she could, wiping away the dirt with an old cloth. Even though she did not know how to play properly, she held it close and touched the strings, creating rough, uneven sounds. She pretended she was performing on a big stage. The guitar was not perfect, but it made her songs feel more real. People around the market often heard her singing in the evenings. Many thought she was just another homeless child making noise, but a few were surprised by the beauty in her voice. A vegetable seller once stopped and listened silently for a minute. When Maya finished, he said, "You have a special gift. Don't stop singing." She did not reply, but the man's words stayed in her heart. They became a secret encouragement she carried with her. Even though Maya loved to sing, she was shy and scared to do it in front of people. She feared someone might laugh at her or tell her to be quiet. But there were moments when hunger was too painful, and singing gave her courage. Sometimes she stood near a bakery where the smell of bread floated through the air and sang quietly. People walked past her, hurried and busy, but she sang anyway. She hoped that maybe, just maybe, someone would hear her voice and feel kindness in their heart. There were days when singing made her feel powerful. But there were also days when she felt too weak to make a sound. Hunger made her dizzy, thirst made her lips dry. On those days, she simply held the guitar and dreamed. She dreamed of having enough food, having a real home, and singing on a stage where people listened to her, not because they pitied her, but because they admired her talent. She didn't know if such dreams could ever come true, but she refused to let them die. One night, while singing under the old street lamp, two little boys came and sat beside her. They were homeless orphans too, living in the nearby slum. They listened quietly and clapped when she finished. One of them said, "Sing again, your voice makes me forget I'm hungry." Maya smiled shyly and continued singing. In that moment, she realized that her voice did more than comfort her, it gave peace to others too. She felt proud not because she was famous, but because her music made someone else feel less alone. Despite this, Maya never expected anything in return. She did not sing for money or gifts. She sang because it was the only thing that belonged to her. Her clothes were thrown away by someone else, her shelter was a broken wall, and her meals depended on luck. But her voice was hers, and no one could take it away. Sometimes, during rainy nights, when she could not sleep because of cold water dripping on her face, she would sing softly. The rain would beat against the metal roofs, but her voice would rise above the noise. She imagined she was singing in front of thousands of people, with lights shining on her and an audience cheering loudly. She imagined microphones, musical instruments, and shining costumes. She imagined being famous, not for money, but so that she would never be hungry again. There was a deep longing in her heart, a desire to be seen, heard, and valued. She did not want pity or charity, she wanted a chance. She wanted someone to notice her talent and help her grow. But she also knew that dreams rarely came true for children like her. Still, she continued singing every day. Not because she was sure life would change, but because singing made her believe it might. And that belief, small and fragile as it was, kept her spirit alive. Maya did not know that her voice would one day reach an audience larger than she ever imagined. She did not know that her songs would open doors she never thought existed. For now, she was just a homeless girl with a broken guitar and a powerful voice, singing to survive in a world that barely noticed her. But every melody she sang was preparing her for a future she could not yet see. News about a local stage show spread across the market and nearby streets. It was a small event planned by a charity group that wanted to raise awareness about poverty in the city. They called it a talent show, but it was less about winning and more about telling the world that poor children had dreams too. Anyone could participate, no matter who they were or where they came from. For most people, it was just another community event, but for children living on the streets, it was rare, an opportunity they rarely got. Posters were put up around the market, though many homeless children couldn't read them. Volunteers walked around, telling people they were welcome to sing, dance, or do any performance they knew. Some laughed, thinking it was silly. Others ignored it because food was more important than talent. But the moment Maya heard about the show, something inside her heart moved. She didn't think about prizes, fame, or applause. She thought about food. Maybe if she performed well, someone would give her something to eat. She didn't know much about stage shows, microphones, or judges, but she knew how to sing. Singing was the only thing she had ever been good at. She wondered if her voice was good enough for people to like. She wondered if she could stand in front of strangers without trembling. She wondered if she could ask for something without feeling ashamed. The thought scared her, but at the same time it excited her. Maya spent the next few days thinking about the show. She practiced at night under the flickering street lamp, pretending that the lamp was a spotlight and the empty street was filled with listeners. She held her broken guitar, plucking it slowly, trying not to break the remaining strings. She repeated lines again and again, making up lyrics about hunger, loneliness, and hope. She didn't know if her songs were good, but they were honest. They came from the deepest part of her heart. Sometimes, children passing by laughed at her, calling her silly for practicing. "No one cares about your voice," they told her. "You're just a beggar." Maya never argued. She just smiled sadly because she knew they were not mean on purpose. They were broken just like her. Poverty had made them hard. Hunger had made them cruel. When you fight every day to survive, you stop believing in dreams. But Maya refused to stop believing. The day before the show, volunteers walked around checking who wanted to participate. They wore bright t-shirts and held clipboards trying to look friendly. One of them noticed Maya sitting alone with her guitar and asked, "Do you want to join the show?" Maya hesitated. She looked at her dirty clothes, her tangled hair, and her bare feet. She felt embarrassed. She thought they might laugh at her. But the volunteer smiled kindly and said, "Everyone is welcome." Maya nodded slowly. That night Maya couldn't sleep. She lay awake, staring at the stars through holes in the roof. She imagined singing in front of a crowd. She imagined people listening quietly, not ignoring her like they usually did. She imagined someone appreciating her voice, not because she begged, but because she deserved it. She wasn't sure what she would say, but she knew she had to say something. She couldn't just sing and leave. Her hunger was too real, too painful, too loud to hide. Morning came and the streets were buzzing with excitement. Children dressed in mismatched clothes lined up, practicing jokes, dances, or songs. Some were confident, some scared, some didn't care. Maya stood in the corner, clutching her guitar tightly. Her stomach growled loudly, but she didn't mind. Hunger had been her companion for so long that she had learned to silence it. The stage was small, made of wooden boards and decorated with colorful cloth. There was a microphone at the center, wires taped to the floor, and speakers that crackled when turned on. It wasn't a grand stage, but to Maya it looked magical. It was a platform where voices could be heard. Judges sat behind a table, 3 adults with serious faces, pens, and papers. They were not celebrities, but they looked important. Children performing before them would sing, dance, or show their skills while the audience clapped or laughed. The atmosphere was noisy, imperfect, but alive. Maya watched from behind the curtain. She felt her heart beating fast, her hands shaking, her legs weak. She was afraid she might faint. She had never stood in front of a crowd before. She had never spoken into a microphone. She had never asked anything from strangers so directly. What if they laughed? What if they ignored her? What if they refused to help? But then she thought of the nights she spent singing alone in the cold. She thought of the hunger that made her cry quietly. She thought of the little boys who said her voice helped them forget pain. She thought of the words from the vegetable seller, "You have a special gift. Don't stop singing." And suddenly she knew she had to try, not just for food but for dignity. She wanted her voice to be heard, even if only once. She wanted to be seen not as a homeless child, but as a human being with talent, feelings, and dreams. When her name was called, she stepped onto the stage slowly. The bright lights hurt her eyes. The crowd looked so big. The microphone felt cold in her hands. She swallowed her fear, took a deep breath, and prepared to speak words she had practiced many times in her mind. She didn't know what the audience would think. She didn't know if her life would change. But she knew one thing: she wasn't going to stay silent anymore. She was ready to sing and to ask for the one thing her life had always lacked: kindness. Maya stood on the stage, trembling slightly, her fingers wrapped tightly around the neck of her broken guitar. The stage lights shone brightly on her face, making her squint, and for a moment she felt as if the world was staring at her too closely. The audience was not huge, but to her it felt enormous. There were children, adults, and volunteers sitting on plastic chairs, waiting to see what she would do. Maya had never stood in front of so many people before, and her heart beat so fast that she could feel it in her throat. The host, a cheerful man with a loud voice, smiled at her and asked gently, "What's your name, little one?" Maya hesitated before answering. Her voice was so soft that only the microphone made it audible. "Maya," she whispered. There was a brief murmur in the crowd. Some people leaned forward, trying to get a better look at the tiny child with the guitar. She looked too fragile, too hungry, too tired to be performing. Some wondered if she would even be able to stand there without falling. The judges looked at her with curiosity. 2 of them had seen many children perform before. Some were nervous, some confident, but Maya looked different. She looked afraid, but not just stage fright. She looked like someone who had been afraid for most of her life. The 3rd judge, a woman with kind eyes, noticed the bruises on her knees, the torn clothes, and the sharp bones visible through her thin skin. She felt her heart tighten. Maya swallowed hard, lifted her head, and in a voice that shook but still managed to sound brave, said the words she had been rehearsing in her mind for days. "If I sing well," she began, pausing for courage, "will you give me a dish of food?" There was silence, complete silence. Even the noisy children stopped talking. Even the restless ones forgot to fidget. The judges' pens froze. The host's smile disappeared. People stared at Maya, trying to understand if they had heard her correctly. A child performing on stage was normal. A child asking for applause was normal. But a child asking for food as payment for talent was heartbreaking. It was not the kind of sentence people heard every day, and it forced everyone to confront a truth that many tried to ignore: hunger was real, and sometimes it had a small, fragile voice. The host cleared his throat, unsure of how to respond. "Of course," he said softly, though he didn't sound sure if that was the right answer. The audience remained quiet, eyes fixed on Maya, wondering what kind of performance would follow such a painful request. Maya didn't wait for more responses. She didn't want pity, long speeches, or promises. She simply wanted food, and she believed singing could earn it. She lifted the guitar into position, though it was almost too big for her small body. Her hands shook, but she steadied them with effort. She looked down, not wanting to see the faces staring at her. The lights were already too bright, the silence already too heavy. Her fingers strummed the first chord. It was rough, uneven, and the guitar buzzed slightly, but it didn't matter. She took a deep breath, closed her eyes, and began to sing. The moment her voice filled the air, the atmosphere changed. It was a voice full of emotion, not trained, not polished, but pure and fragile, like something that could break at any moment. She didn't sing loudly, she didn't know how. She sang softly, but every word carried weight. Her song wasn't just music. It was a story of hunger, loneliness, fear, and hope. She sang about sleeping on cold ground, about searching for scraps, about being invisible, about wishing someone would see her, even for a moment. People in the audience listened, stunned. They had come to watch children perform, laugh, clap, maybe take photos. They hadn't come to be confronted with pain. Maya's voice didn't beg, but it revealed. It showed what life looked like when survival depended on strangers and luck. And somehow, despite its sadness, her music was beautiful. Some audience members wiped their eyes. Others looked down, ashamed they had walked past children like Maya every day without noticing them. Even the noisy children, who usually laughed at everything, sat quietly, unsure of what to feel. The judges exchanged glances. They had judged many performances before, based on technique, creativity, and confidence. But this wasn't something they could grade on a paper. This wasn't performance, it was truth. As she sang, Maya forgot for a moment where she was. The stage, the crowd, the judges, they all disappeared in her mind. She wasn't singing to win anything. She was singing because it was all she could offer. It was her only currency, her only chance. When she finished, the last note hung in the air like a fragile thread. She opened her eyes slowly, unsure of what she would see. The first thing she noticed was silence again, but this time it was different. It wasn't confused or shocked. It was respectful, heavy, emotional. Then quietly at first someone began to clap. One person, then two, then the entire audience stood applauding loudly. They weren't cheering for a performance. They were cheering for a child who had the courage to stand on a stage and tell the world she was hungry. Maya didn't smile. She didn't know how to react. Applause didn't fill stomachs. Clapping didn't stop hunger. She looked at the judges, waiting for an answer to her question, the only question that mattered to her. Would she get food? The judges didn't speak right away. They looked at her with a mix of sadness and admiration. They had never heard a request so simple and so powerful. And in that moment, everyone in the room knew, no matter what happened next, Maya's life would never be the same again. Maya waited on the stage with her small, tired eyes fixed on the judges, not fully understanding what a standing ovation meant. She only understood silence, hunger, and fear. Loud applause confused her. People were clapping, cheering, even shouting her name, but she didn't smile because she didn't know what applause could give her. Applause didn't fill empty stomachs. Applause didn't make pain disappear. She wanted only one thing: food. The judges tried to collect themselves. They had listened to many performances that day, but none had struck them so deeply. The first judge, a middle-aged man with glasses, leaned forward, his voice gentle, almost shaky. "Maya, that was beautiful." She nodded politely, not knowing how to respond. Compliments didn't mean much to her. She had heard kind words before, but they never came with food. The second judge, a younger woman, wiped her eyes secretly. She never expected a child to sing with such emotion. Maya's voice had not been technically perfect, but it had something rare, a pain that felt real, not acted. She whispered to the judge beside her, "I've never heard anything like that." The third judge, the woman with kind eyes, was the first to speak clearly. "Yes, Maya, you will get food," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear, but Maya didn't react immediately. She wasn't sure if it was a promise or just another kind sentence people said to children like her. She had learned over time that sometimes adults spoke kind words but forgot them later. She didn't trust easily. She didn't believe in promises because promises had broken too many times. The audience, however, reacted quickly. They started cheering louder, and some people rushed backstage to find something to give her. Maya stood under the bright lights, confused by all the noise. She looked down at her guitar, the broken instrument that had been her only companion. She didn't know whether to step off the stage or stay where she was. All she knew was that her stomach hurt, like it did every day, and she needed something to eat before she fainted. The host walked onto the stage holding a microphone. His voice was softer now, not loud and cheerful like earlier. "Give her a big round of applause," he shouted, but even he seemed emotional. He placed a supportive hand on her shoulder, careful and gentle, like she might break if touched too hard. "You're very brave, Maya," he said quietly. For a second, Maya almost believed it. Suddenly, a woman from the audience ran forward holding a lunch box. "Here, sweetheart, take this," she said, her voice full of worry rather than pride. Maya stared at the food like it was a miracle. She took the box slowly, almost afraid someone might take it back. She sat on the stage floor, opened it, and began eating immediately, no hesitation, no embarrassment. She didn't care that hundreds of eyes were watching her. Hunger made manners disappear. The audience fell silent again, watching a child eat with desperation. People realized that Maya had not exaggerated. She wasn't performing hunger, she lived it every day. Some people looked away because the sight was too painful. Others cried without hiding their tears. As Maya ate, she didn't look up or around. She didn't worry about how she looked or what people thought. Food was the prize she had worked for. She appreciated applause, but food was life. Every bite filled her with relief, and for the first time that day, she felt safe. The judges stepped down from their table and approached her. They didn't want to sit above her anymore. They wanted to meet her where she was, small, fragile, real. The woman judge knelt beside her. "Maya, do you live on the street?" she asked gently. Maya nodded while chewing. "Do you have anyone who takes care of you?" Maya shook her head. She didn't know how to explain her life in long sentences. Hunger had replaced many words. The judges exchanged worried glances. They had not expected the talent show to turn into a rescue mission. But life had different plans. The first judge spoke softly. "Would you like to go to school someday, Maya?" She didn't look up. School was a foreign word. She didn't know what children did there. She only knew that school meant food for some kids. That idea made her nod again. She didn't understand the question, but she understood hunger. While adults discussed her future, Maya continued eating silently, feeling warmth spread inside her empty stomach. She didn't know that her performance had changed the mood of the entire event. People were no longer thinking about entertainment, they were thinking about responsibility. Maya had not asked for pity, she had asked for fairness. "Give me food if I give you talent." It was the simplest contract, yet the most powerful. When she finished eating, she wiped her face with her sleeve and looked around shyly, like she wasn't sure what to do next. The audience clapped again, not loud this time, but soft and respectful. They were not cheering for a performer, they were honoring a survivor. The judges led her backstage, not to question her, but to care for her. Adults gathered, some offering money, some offering clothes, some offering help. Maya didn't understand everything happening around her, but she understood one thing. For the first time in a long time, people were looking at her, not as a burden or a beggar, but as a child who deserved more than scraps. And as she held her broken guitar tightly, she wondered whether her voice had finally given her something she had been fighting for since the day she became alone. A chance at a different life. Maya sat backstage with crumbs still around her mouth, her stomach finally feeling warm for the first time in many days. She didn't fully understand what had just happened. She thought she had simply sung a song, asked for food, and received it. But to the adults and children watching, the moment had been much bigger than that. It had forced everyone in the room to confront a truth they often ignored. There were children living around them who were hungry every single day, not because they were lazy, but because life had never given them a chance. Lazy, but because life had never given them a chance. As Maya sat quietly, exhausted but calmer than before, people gathered around her. Volunteers whispered to each other, unsure what to do next. They had planned a fun event, not a life-changing moment. Some wanted to take Maya to a shelter immediately. Others suggested giving her money, food, or clothes. Some just stood there, speechless, unsure how a small child could shake their hearts so deeply. The judges, who had started the day thinking about scores and talent categories, were now thinking about responsibility. They could not go back to judging performances as if nothing had happened. Maya's song had changed everything. The woman with kind eyes sat next to Maya, offering her a cup of warm milk. "Are you feeling okay?" she asked softly. Maya nodded, taking small sips. She wasn't used to drinking milk. It tasted too rich, too sweet, almost unreal. Her body, confused by sudden comfort, felt sleepy. She leaned against the chair, eyes half closed, still clutching her guitar for safety. The audience, meanwhile, was buzzing with emotion. People argued, cried, and even apologized to themselves for walking past children like Maya without caring. They promised silently, "I'll do better," though many knew such promises faded once real life resumed. But for that moment, their hearts were open. The stage show continued, but the energy had changed. The next performer, a confident boy who had spent weeks practicing his dance routine, tried his best, but the audience wasn't fully engaged. They clapped politely, but their minds remained with Maya. Her tiny figure eating hungrily on stage was stuck in everyone's memory like a photograph. It was impossible to forget. Backstage, someone arrived carrying a big bag of bread, fruits, and snacks. For her, they said, handing it to the judges. Others followed with blankets, clothes, bottles of water. It became a quiet donation line, each person offering something like an apology for letting her starve. Maya looked at the bags with confusion. She wasn't used to having more than one meal at a time. She didn't know what to do with extra food. She had never owned more than she could eat immediately. The first judge crouched beside her and asked, "Do you know where your parents are?" Maya shook her head again. Her eyes didn't show sadness when she said it. She had accepted their absence long ago. She didn't cry for them anymore. She simply lived as someone who belonged nowhere. The second judge, emotional but trying to stay composed, asked, "Do you want us to help you?" Maya didn't respond quickly, not because she didn't understand, but because she didn't know what help meant. She had learned to survive alone. She didn't know how to trust adults with promises. After a moment, she nodded shyly, but her face didn't show excitement, only careful hope. Outside, something unexpected began to happen. Audience members started putting money into a donation box for her, though one didn't exist at first. They created one quickly with a plastic container. People placed whatever they could, small amounts, big amounts, coins, bills. No one said, "This is charity." They said, "This is for her future." For clothes, food, school, anything that could give her a different life. Meanwhile, children who had laughed earlier now looked guilty. They whispered to each other, "She sings better than anyone," almost as if accepting her talent helped erase their cruelty. They didn't know how to apologize, so they stayed away, watching her from a distance like she was fragile and important. When it was time for her to go back home, though home for her was the street, the judges stopped her. "You're not sleeping outside tonight," the woman said with firm kindness. "We will take care of you." Maya stared at her blankly. She didn't know what it meant to have someone take care of her. She didn't know how to be cared for. But she nodded because the woman looked trustworthy. The volunteers brought her to a small shelter nearby, a safe place with beds, lights, and food. Maya looked around silently, her eyes scared but curious. She had never slept on a mattress before. She touched it with her fingers as if testing if it was real. While she settled in, the judges and volunteers discussed what to do next. They made plans, real plans, not just emotional promises. They contacted a school, arranged temporary guardianship, organized supplies, and prepared paperwork. Maya didn't know any of this was happening. She simply curled up under a blanket, feeling strange warmth on her skin, unsure if she deserved it. For the first time in a very long time, she fell asleep with a full belly, not on cold concrete, not under plastic bags, not with fear, but in a bed, safe, protected. Adults continued worrying, planning, and arguing, but Maya slept peacefully, unaware that her life had already begun to change. And outside, in the city that had ignored her for years, people were still talking about the little girl who asked a heartbreaking question. "If I sing well, will you give me a dish of food?" The morning sunlight entered the small shelter room, touching Maya's face gently. She had been asleep for many hours, deeper and calmer than she had ever slept on the streets. Usually she woke up from cold wind, noise, or hunger, but this time she woke up because her body was finally rested. For a moment, she didn't remember where she was. She sat up quickly, eyes wide, thinking she might have overslept and missed a chance to find food. But then she saw the mattress beneath her, the clean blanket around her, and the room with 4 walls. It felt unreal, almost like a dream she didn't want to end. A volunteer entered quietly, carrying a plate of warm food. Maya stared at it with the same wonder a child has when seeing a toy for the first time. "Good morning, Maya," the volunteer said softly. "Are you hungry?" Maya nodded, even though she had eaten the night before. Hunger didn't disappear just because she slept well. She took the plate carefully and began eating in small, fast bites. She didn't speak, but the volunteer didn't mind. Silence had become her language. Later that morning, the judges came to visit her. They were dressed neatly, looking different from the previous night when emotions had made them look tired. Today, they looked determined, like people who had made an important decision. Maya sat shyly, unsure why they were there. She was afraid they might ask her to leave. She thought maybe the shelter was temporary and she would be sent back to the streets soon. The woman with kind eyes sat beside her again. "Maya," she began gently, "you have a beautiful talent and we want to help you." Maya looked down at her hands, nervous. She didn't know if help meant food, clothes, or something else. The woman continued, "There is a music school nearby and they have agreed to give you a place. You can learn to sing and play properly. You can have meals there every day." Maya didn't react immediately. She didn't know what a music school looked like or what people did there. She didn't understand why anyone would give her food without making her beg for it. Her voice was not something she thought was valuable enough to trade for real opportunities. She thought singing was just a way to stop pain for a while, not a path to a better life. The first judge smiled warmly at her confusion. "You don't have to decide now, but we want you to have a chance." Maya nodded slowly, still unsure. Life on the streets had taught her to distrust sudden kindness. Good things usually didn't last. She feared that if she believed too quickly, she would be disappointed again. But at the same time, she felt a small spark of hope, like a tiny flame that refused to die. Later in the day, Maya was taken to the music school. The building was big and colorful, with posters of children holding instruments and smiling. She walked inside hesitantly, clutching her broken guitar. The hallways smelled like wood and paint, and children's laughter echoed through the space. Maya had not heard so many happy voices together in a long time. It made her feel nervous and lonely, like she didn't belong. A teacher approached her with a warm smile. "Welcome, Maya. You can bring your guitar here. Show me what you can do." Maya stared at the teacher, afraid she would be judged harshly. But the teacher's tone was gentle, encouraging. Maya took a deep breath and strummed the guitar softly, singing a few lines of the song she always sang at night. She sang quietly, thinking her voice wasn't good enough for a school. But the teacher listened, eyes wide. She didn't hear a trained voice, but she heard something rare, emotion so strong it could not be taught. When Maya finished, the teacher clapped softly and said, "You are special, Maya, and we will help you grow." Maya didn't know how to respond. She simply nodded and hugged her guitar tightly like a shield. Days turned into weeks and Maya's life began to change. She learned how to hold the guitar properly, how to breathe correctly while singing, how to pronounce words clearly, and how to express emotions through music. She wasn't the fastest learner, but she was the most passionate. Every note she sang came from a place of truth, shaped by hunger, loneliness, and strength. The school provided meals every day. For the first time in her life, she ate regularly. Her face became fuller, her eyes brighter, her body stronger. She learned how to smile, not out of fear, but out of happiness. She made friends slowly, cautious at first, but opening up when she realized no one wanted to hurt her. One afternoon, the woman judge visited Maya at school. She watched Maya rehearse and saw how much she had changed in such a short time. She felt proud, not because Maya was becoming a good singer, but because she was becoming a child again, a child who laughed, learned, and dreamed. The judge asked her gently, "How do you feel now?" Maya thought carefully before answering. She didn't have big, complicated words. She simply said, "Full, not hungry." It wasn't just physical hunger she was talking about. It was the hunger for kindness, safety, and belonging. Maya didn't know what her future would be. She didn't know if she would ever become famous or perform on big stages. But she knew something had changed forever. Her voice was no longer just a way to survive. It had become a bridge to a better life. A path she had once thought impossible was slowly opening in front of her, one note at a time. Months passed, and Maya's life slowly transformed in ways she never imagined. The little girl who once wandered the streets searching for scraps now walked through the halls of the music school with a small bag over her shoulder, a clean shirt on her back, and a guitar that actually belonged to her. It wasn't new, fancy, or expensive, but it wasn't broken like the one she once clung to. It had all its strings, and it played a sound that matched her new life, fuller, clearer, hopeful. Maya still remembered the streets, the hunger, and the cold. She remembered sleeping under broken roofs and waking up frightened by noises in the night. But those memories slowly turned from wounds into stories, and painful stories that shaped who she was, but no longer controlled her. She didn't forget where she came from, not because she couldn't, but because she didn't want to. Her past was a shadow she carried, but it wasn't darkness anymore. It was a reminder of how far she had come. At the music school, Maya made friends with children who didn't laugh at her clothes or her silence. At first, she found it hard to talk. She was afraid people would judge her or worse, pity her. But the other children didn't see her as a homeless girl. They saw her as a musician, someone with a voice that made them quiet. They respected her without even understanding why. She didn't speak much, but she listened, learned, and slowly began to trust. Her teachers admired her too, not because she was perfect, but because she tried so hard. Maya wasn't used to lessons, schedules, or homework. She wasn't used to being encouraged. She was used to being ignored. So every time someone clapped for her, praised her, or corrected her gently, she felt a small warmth inside her chest. Not comfort, not confidence, something new, something she slowly learned to call belonging. Every evening, she practiced her songs with dedication. She sang about places she had never seen, dreams she could barely imagine, and feelings she still didn't know how to name. But sometimes she sang about her past, the hunger, the darkness, the fear. She didn't sing about it to make people sad. She sang because music had become her voice, and her truth deserved to be spoken even if it was painful. One day, the school announced a small performance night. Students would sing, play instruments, or perform anything they had learned. Parents, neighbors, and volunteers would attend. It wasn't a competition, it was simply a celebration. Maya was chosen to perform last, not because she was the best, but because her teachers believed she had something special to share. On the night of the performance, the hall filled with people. Children dressed in clean clothes ran around excitedly, practicing on their instruments. Maya stood backstage, holding her guitar tightly. She was nervous, but it was a different kind of nervousness, not fear of rejection, but fear of not doing justice to her story. When her name was called, she walked onto the stage slowly. Lights shone down on her face just like before, but this time she did not feel small or invisible. She felt seen. The crowd waited quietly, curious to hear the girl who had become somewhat of a legend in the school, not because of her past, but because of her heart. Maya closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and began to sing. Her voice was stronger now, clearer, more controlled, but still filled with emotion. She sang about dreams, about hope, about children who sleep on cold ground wishing for warmth. She sang about hunger, not just hunger for food, but hunger for love, safety, and dignity. She sang about a little girl who once asked a simple question: "If I sing well, will you give me a dish of food?" The audience listened in silence. Some wiped tears from their eyes, some held their children tighter, some promised themselves that they would never ignore suffering again. Maya didn't need to ask for food this time. She didn't need to beg for kindness. She had earned their attention and respect with her voice. When she finished, the audience stood up and applauded loudly, but Maya didn't cry or act surprised. She simply bowed with grace, like someone who had learned her worth. After the show, children hugged her, teachers congratulated her, and strangers approached her, thanking her for the song. Maya didn't know what to say, so she smiled shyly and nodded. She wasn't used to praise, but she accepted it with quiet dignity. Later that night, Maya sat outside the school looking at the sky. She held her guitar close, not because she was afraid of losing it, but because it had become a part of her story. She thought of the stage where it all began, the hungry girl who sang for food, the audience who listened, and the people who helped her. She realized something important. She had sung that night not to survive, but to inspire. She had sung not because she was hungry, but because she was full of courage, full of gratitude, full of dreams. Her journey was not perfect. There would be difficult days ahead, new challenges and new fears. But she was not the same child anymore. She had a voice, a community, and a future. And whenever she saw a child on the street, hungry and lonely, she remembered her past and whispered silently, "I see you. I understand." The world had once ignored her, but she refused to ignore others. Her music, once a cry for help, had become a promise to use her voice for those who had none. And that promise was the beginning of her new life.